Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most triumvirate work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are joined by our very special guests from the community, Dawn and Kipos. Welcome, folks.
Hello.
Hey.
We're all here to discuss, or should I say, reflect on Out on a Limb, Arc 3 of Pale. So I guess
that pun's already in the title of the episode. I don't feel like you needed to make it.
I just came up with it just then. Let's get into it, I guess. So just as a quick reminder, what happened in Arc 3? Well, it started with 3.1, where Verona and Lucy were scrambling after Nicolette has stolen Snowdrop and Avery away, and Miss makes the ultimate sacrifice.
And then we jumped into the interview notes 2, which basically took us through all the others that we interviewed in Arc 2, which was Alpi, the Fairy, the Goblins, and also Miss was in there, and then there was a sad little bye Miss.
Then Lucy and Verna chat with Melissa before everyone heads out and negotiates with the Belanges. Everyone wins except Nicolette.
Then in 3.3, we get back into Avery's head. So we have this big disconnect here. Mine are slightly longer than everybody else's reflections so far. We have a bit of a disconnect with her civilian life and her practitioner life as she's like using the practice against her siblings again. This time with the rope, which was, a little bit worrying.
But it was so cool though, right? Like, it was worrying, yes, but also so cool, so it's probably fine.
Yeah, I mean,
How many
it was
times
really
did you wish you could do that to your sibling?
Okay, look, all right. Yeah, who wouldn't want to do it? But also, I mean, come on. Then she has a bit of a freak out with Grumble yelling at the TV, which was very worrying. And then they all go to school again, which I remember being horrified at, that she was actually going to school and not just taking the frickin' day off.
Take it.
Yeah, like at least a day. Of course, we get some more Snowdrop, who is the best character ever. Then they go spy on some others.
Yes. Then we jump into the bonus material timelines, which gives us a calendar that just kind of sums up what time everything happened in the story, which is nice. Also, it's got some great doodles by Avery, which is always a treat.
And then we went into 3.4, which was where Lucy got invited to a party. And we got that great sort of biology/gardening metaphor for life before everyone went off to interview Matthew. And this is where Lucy sort of figures out the connection between Yolda and the Hungry Choir.
In 3.5, Avery fails her stealth roll while spying on John before heading back to help the others finishing the interview with Matthew and Edith. Things get heated, and the night is called early. Avery goes back and hugs her trashy hobo child.
Then we have another nice little bonus bit, which is the gifts received, which is a neat little checklist of all the gifts that Kenneteers have received. Again, really incredibly helpful to be reminded of exactly what they have, and some awesome illustrations.
Yep. And then we have Verona in 3.6. We have Verona hanging out with her dad, which obviously goes to shit. Who could have suspected? Before she goes off and starts tracking down Bree, who was the footless woman in the THC ritual a few nights ago. So she meets up with Avery, and the two kind of connect up before getting into a fight with Zed.
And so then the next day, Lucy and Verona are sort of stalking the local B&B to see if Bree's going to show up again. Rowan shows up and they decide to dunk on him instead for being useless. And then they all head to a meeting with all of the Kennet others who also don't really feel like doing anything today.
Then we have the bonus material confiscated items, where we get a very stylish look at the charmed items Bree had on her when she was captured.
And then we are back into 3.8, and we get a really cool look at another beat of the wealth disparity in Kennet, which I thought was really awesome and interesting to look at. And we see the girls planning on how to fight the local others, which is very much becoming more of a practitioner in line with the Blue Heron Institute practitioners, rather than, what the others would actually want from them. Of course, they think they're doing pretty well, but they underestimate the goblins, and Avery gets a screwdriver stab in the arm, which is horrible. I noticed in this one there was some really cool foreshadowing as well, with Bree chomping down into one of the goblins, which would just be disgusting. I mean, really.
Remember when that was the worst thing she'd eaten?
Yeah, she just it was really gross. Just chomped right into him and just kept on going. Ugh. And so we get Gilherm's. I don't know if anybody else noted this. I mean, I assume most people did, but when they came out from under the bridge and they walk out into like, very bright sun, I was immediately like, oh God, Gilham's there. Oh, run away. And he has a really cool fight, a really cool little mock fight with Lucy, which lets the others go and meet Zed. Lucy attempts some really neat practice shenanigans, and like she's changing the form of her pen, which she, hadn't done. And she tries to like counter Gilham's like the fact that he hasn't given a gift, but I mean, he's a fairy, so it didn't matter. He just completely got past it.
Yeah, I think we talked enough about how she had a pen spear that kept leaking blue ink, which is just like such a cool piece of
and then she transformed it into both a fan and a short sword in that fight, and was like actively swapping between the forms, which she's never done before. Like all we saw before this was like, a can is naturally going to want to go into a gun, for example. Whereas here she's very actively swapping them. It was really cool. And we find out why Gilham's in Kennet, and it's very high summer, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then we get into 3.9. Avery does some shopping, does some glamour, and then the trio visits Louise to do their final interview, and all the clues start to kind of click into place.
Then just before we dived into the interlude, we had the Sunny Day logs, which was our look at Zed breaking past Ray's Snow White-based security before kind of giving us an outline for his plan to take out the Hungry Choir.
And then in 3.Z, we wrap up with Zed and Bree going on a road trip to visit friends, but Bree eats too much.
Classic. Eats too much on a road trip. Classic story. So I guess what did everybody think of Arc 3? What were the things that jumped out to people?
I mean, I loved it. Like Arc 3 was amazing. I really love where the story's going. Yeah, it's just been tons of fun.
Yeah, because we sort of we open with Miss sort of going, and that that could have been the end of the previous arc, but I think it's kind of instead it's the opening of this one because that's sort of the catalyst for all the rest of the shit that kind of starts to happen between the Kenneteers and the Kennet others in this arc.
Yeah, you're right. That really is, it kind of defines what's going to happen in the arc in a way that you don't really realize at the start. But this arc really is just about the degradation of the relationships between the trio and the Kennet others.
Yeah, it's really rough. Really rough to read that stuff.
I feel like Arc 2 is where Pale came into its own for me, but 3 definitely continues the trend and, like you were saying, reframes the conflict from more about the investigation into the Carmine Beast into who can we trust.
Yeah.
It was just it was so funny because I don't think I ever trusted Miss until she sacrificed herself, and then it was like, wait, now we're really screwed.
Yep.
Because I didn't realize I could trust her, but also now she's gone and she was the person holding this shit together. So it's that sort of classic Wild Bow, but wait, it can get worse.
It's interesting to me as we now round out on starting to have key suspects again and starting to dive into the explanation of the mystery. I've realized that I've just completely written Miss off as a suspect, but that's not necessarily correct, right? Is this just the biggest con of all time and Miss is actually behind it all?
Ooh.
I keep having that thought, but I can't figure out a way to go with it. I don't know where I would I can't draw the line for motive, means, or opportunity there. But when you say it can always get worse, that I don't know what it is about Pale. Maybe it's the reputation that Pact has, but I did not walk into this, or just having read Parahumans, I did not walk into this with any expectation that we'd ever hit rock bottom or ever could.
Yeah, I think reading Wildbow works as a continual exercise in me reevaluating what rock bottom is.
Yep.
Yeah.
I keep thinking we're there, and then it turns out we're not.
Yeah, as someone who's read all of them, basically yes, it can always get worse. Don't worry.
Well, I guess what did you two? As I guess what I would classify you guys as normal people reading the story normal.
Good way to phrase it, Elliot.
What are sort of some of your thoughts as we've been sort of moving through this stuff?
Well, I mean, I just want to make a quick note that because I've been live reading this story over on the Doof Discord, and I called it in my 1.1 live read that Verona's dad is a piece of shit, and I have been continually validated by this. Also,
we've got a redemption arc coming in, I reckon.
Oh,
in a few chapters. Verona's dad redemption arc, I'm calling it.
It's a long hill to climb.
I do think it's really interesting that you can see like what he was like before the divorce, you know?
Yeah.
Like when he was like a functioning human being, and he was clearly like all right, like he was
Better.
fine.
That's the worst part about it, though, right? Is
Yeah.
you see these flashes of like, and in this, I can't remember exactly which chapter it is. I think it's 3.6, maybe. You get these moments of like, oh shit, maybe there's gonna be, oh, maybe it's suddenly gonna start to turn around. Maybe it's finally
God.
gonna start to turn around, and it doesn't every time, and it's so fucking frustrating.
Yeah, that one hurts so much.
Mhm.
The thing that really irks me about him is like I can't help but pity him more than I hate him. Like I don't just hate him. I just sort of look at him and I just want him to get help as much as I want him to change.
Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah. I mean, there's a ton of pity for him, but also oh god, just get Verona away from him, like just
Yes.
as soon as possible. Like get her away. Oh my god,
That is the most important thing.
Oh. Also, I think this arc is really like the Snowdrop arc. Honestly, like hot take here, but she's the best. She's made the entire story a million times better, and everybody loves her.
That's a very unique opinion, Kibos. Yeah, sorry. I just
I know.
really
Look,
want
I
to
said it's a hot
support your
take.
bravery for saying that.
I've not read Pact, and I'm only a little bit into Twig, but she's my favorite Wildbow character.
She's just so
She's
fun.
so good.
Like it's just such a simple concept, the idea that she just says the opposite of what she means, but it consistently works and is so fun.
Yeah, every single point where she talks, I am just loving it.
What I love is that the opposite can be taken in so many different directions. So, it's a little bit of a puzzle sometimes where you're just like, this doesn't immediately jump to mind. What did she mean? And also, there's multiple, like, you can jump to the most wholesome or the most snarky or whatever you want her to be acting like in that time. So she just like, yeah.
She really is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Like I think obviously she was introduced right at the end of the last arc, but this was really the one where she steps up.
Something that I've found interesting about Snowdrop is in a story where, like stopping and noticing the wording that everyone uses is so important, right? Snowdrop is such an interesting tool for like forcing you to slow down when you're reading it, because you can't just like read through and understand what's going on. You kind of have to, every time I read a chapter and Snowdrop says something, I have to stop and be like, wait, hold on. And like take, that mental half a second to process it. And because of that, I feel like I'm paying so much more attention to things on, like, you just feel like you're stopping and actually digesting things more. So I really like how well Snowdrop acts as this device in the story as well. It's great.
Yeah, a minute ago you were asking how is it reading the story normally? I got like a few arcs into live reading Twig, so to have some idea of what you're doing, and it's just so much work, but you get so much more out of it. Like you catch all these things, and I feel like I'm just missing everything without having your insight here.
Yeah.
There's definitely been discrepancies, like when I live read something the first time, and then I sit down to read it the second time, and I'm like, oh, I totally misunderstood this little section here. Whether it's something Snowdrop says or something else that's going on. Because it's definitely, I definitely, sometimes Snowdrop says something and I'm like, what do you mean? And then half a second later, oh, no, wait, yeah, she meant the opposite. Okay, no, this is fine.
Yeah, yes. Look, honestly, everybody loves Snowdrop. She's so good.
So something else that happened over the course of this chapter is as we started to move away from the Kennet others, we kind of learned a bit more about some of the other practitioners in town, right? Obviously, we got some Belanger stuff, and we got some other Blue Heron Institute stuff, I guess I'll say. How is everyone vibing just on the other practitioners that are seeming to become major characters in this story so far?
Did you use the word vibing because it's Zed? Like Zed's the main one?
I'm trying to become more like Zed in my day-to-day life, I guess.
Can I just request that you don't do that? Because, like, he's a great character. Like, don't get me wrong, he's fantastic. But, oh, God. Like, he literally dresses like a greaser. Like, he calls it timeless, but he's dressed like a greaser. Like, come on, dude.
I love that discrepancy, like, when we were in Zed's head in 3.Z, and he's like, oh, I dress in this way, and it's, totally timeless. But when we were first introduced to him, I think it was in Lucy's perspective, and she was like, the fuck is this guy wearing?
Timeless.
I love that he had a power glove as well. Like, it's so
Yeah,
painfully retro. It hurts so much.
I'm so upset we didn't get to see what it
Oh,
does.
I know, right? Like, it's
It
clearly
lets
a
you
weapon.
play with power,
I think.
obviously.
You know what the best answer is? It's not actually magical.
It's just part of his outfit.
Oh god, I hate it so much.
All right, I admit. What is a power glove?
Oh no.
It was like a Nintendo Entertainment System accessory, and so it had like a D-pad and some buttons on the glove. And I've never actually used it. I don't know what else it did, but like it was like a fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! Dual Disc.
I was just thinking it was like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Dual Disc. That's the exact thing I was just thinking of as an analogy. Which, now that we've both said it, makes me think I would love to see a Technomancer wearing a fucking Dual Disc. Can you imagine?
Oh god.
It's time to practice.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be you've made me think about how that would work, like within the world
I place my tarot
of
card
the
in
Otherverse.
face down defense position.
I mean, I
Obviously,
feel like-
is how it would work.
Oh, it's so horrible.
I summon this other.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You take your others and you bind them in trading cards.
Oh my god. I mean, it's
So
basically
horrible.
Pokemon. We've already
Oh
covered
my
that with
God.
the explicit
true.
lampshading of that with John, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Classic. Anyway, so yeah, Zed's pretty good.
Imagine getting like a cursed Pokemon cartridge, and you go to the
Oh,
PC
man.
in the game, and there's some like other in there.
Jeez.
There's probably already creepy.
No, there is.
That
It's
stop that.
like the haunted Lavender Town creepypasta.
Oh,
Anyway.
I think I've read that one.
Yeah. It's been a long time.
Creepypasta's weird. I did kind of want to point out that because we see in 3.Z like practitioners engaging with the Hungry Choir, and I just kind of wanted to point out how stuffed these people are now. Like the first thing they say basically is a lie, because they say how glad we are to dine. Like I don't believe for even a millionth of a second that they're glad to be caught in this ritual and dining. Like, come on.
Isn't Bree the only one who got stuffed?
Okay. All right.
Is
Wow.
stuffed Aussie slang? Maybe we're running into an
Maybe.
Yeah. Stuffed as in
Yeah,
squid.
that might also be Aussie slang, actually.
Oh. I'm going down a rabbit hole here.
Yes,
trouble.
they are in trouble with the words that they have said. Like,
Gotcha.
they'll come to the table every night this moon, which is very ambiguous. I wouldn't know what that means.
That just means they're going to eat dinner. I don't know. They'll
Like,
come
what-
to
wait,
a
what
table.
table? Yeah, what table?
Yeah.
What's this moon? Like, is that just one cycle of the moon, or I don't even know.
I think it's
Maybe
explicitly
that's just
not,
tonight.
right?
Yeah.
Like, they said that the moon phases are off of what they should be, so I think like this moon is like this wandering off moon.
Oh, I don't even know. And of course, now Zed and the others that sang these lines will I can't pronounce that. Never again find themselves picking up a spoon, a fork, nor a blade, nor a plate, nor a cup. So, like,
Did they actually sing that?
yeah, they sang that. Like, I went through 3.Z earlier
man.
and brought out all of the parts that Zed sang that I thought were like, oh god, that's a mistake.
It's just
Everyone
forks,
sang every
just
word,
forks now.
minus like 3 exceptions where they called out that someone messed something up. But otherwise,
Yeah.
everyone sang every word.
We did call out in our last episode the lines that Zed skipped and how bad those would be. But I mean, now that you've brought this list of ones they didn't
Yeah.
skip out, Hip Boss,
Yeah,
it's
like-
concerning.
And they'll have to stay full and supped and sated since this tune. So after they're finished singing, they have to be full and supped and sated at all times. Otherwise, that's a lie.
I mean, yeah,
Like,
I wonder if, I wonder whether they can argue that they didn't mean forever.
it's
It's interesting.
We don't know enough about the intricacies of arguing this stuff, I suppose.
Because
Yeah.
it's not like there was any big, like, we heard that when someone gets forsworn, there's like a crackle of thunder, right? Unless you're like explicitly forsworn by another person that's present. And obviously that didn't happen. So I wonder if there is if they've passed the statute of limitations on it, theoretically, or something,
Well, I thought that was for like major oaths. Like, for example, if you're like, you will always be
Yeah,
safe in my
true.
home, and then you fuck that up with Charles, like that's when you get a crack of thunder.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you have a small white lie, that's not going to make you forsworn, is my understanding.
yeah, I remember Alpiana oh god, I can't say these names. Alpi, talking to Lucy and saying that Lucy had made like several white lies. I feel like this is probably in a similar thing.
Yeah.
So possibly a
Which
power
presumably
hit, but
just
not
doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Minor oaths feels good.
Yeah. Also, they said they're not going to miss a single beat and they shall not miss a single word. And then Zed very specifically chose not to sing certain words. Like, come on, dude. That's probably not a great idea.
Although, isn't part of it as well, like whether someone calls you out on it to some degree? Like, I can't remember.
I think that's if there is a person to call you out. If there is no one, I think that responsibility is the universe's or something.
So maybe,
that makes sense.
Like, I don't know, Alex Belanger, for example, now has power over the other, 7 people that were at that ritual.
He wouldn't hold that.
No, I'm sure he's charitable.
He's such a nice guy.
I would think it'd be Yalda who now has that power to call them Forsworn, because she was the one, like, as the Hungry Choir.
Yeah, who made them swear the oaths. Yeah.
So does that mean now Bree has exactly it? Bree has that power now.
And by the power of transference, when one practitioner eats another, they gain all their karmic debts, and that's just how it works.
I mean, I think this is.
I hope this is an edge case.
It's somewhat of a metaphor, analogy. I don't know. Like, she didn't literally just eat her; she absorbed her power as well.
Yeah.
She also did literally just eat her.
Yeah, she did both.
But it wasn't just like the transference of meat and gristle. It was like her power, her otherness got assimilated.
Nice.
There.
Nice, Elliot. Good on you.
Waiting for a chance to bust that out.
They also swore that on these nights they shan't fail to take a bite. And like, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't see Zed eat anything that night before or after saying this. So like, I mean, I'm just saying, like, these are a lot of little oaths.
They were talking about going to get fast food after, so maybe that's it.
Yeah. I'm willing to trust that this group of practitioners is smart enough to have done that off screen, I suppose. Because, otherwise they'd be in a whole heap of trouble.
Yeah.
Bree certainly ate, so she's just building up that karmic domino.
What do you think Bree is going to be like now? Like, okay, so she's clearly...
Because they're talking about awakening her,
right?
Like,
okay, because the point I want to call out here is, obviously, Yalda was very powerful in the terms that she was able to pretty effectively take down these practitioners, right? She was clearly high tier. And we know that, for example, the Kenneteers have been quite powerful just because they have the power of these powerful others behind them. So presumably that's the case with Bree too. She's just going to be like a super powerful food wizard when she awakens, because I'm so on board for that.
Well, I wonder, it's going to be really interesting to see how she goes as an awakened. Like, does she get the Hungry Choirs? Wait, does she have to keep giving the Kenneteers power? Like, how much does she inherit?
That's really interesting.
Maybe she has to give a gift to the Kenneteers.
The Hungry Choir never gave in the ritual, nor gave them gifts, so I don't know what that looks like. Maybe she owes them, but somehow the Hungry Choir had gotten around what everyone else needed to do in that ritual.
Yeah, but it was giving them power. Did it have to?
Was
and
it?
Does Bree have to?
I think that was called out by...
Was it explicitly giving her power?
Yeah.
I think Edith implied that.
Yeah, I think Edith...
Or Matthew.
Okay.
Yeah, Edith or Matthew said that, like, you're taking 1% of power from each other.
Yeah.
And considering the Hungry Choir Yeah. So...
Actually, that's a good point. I suppose in Arc 4, the 3 will presumably have taken a power hit.
Well, unless Bree
not only did they use up...
Yeah.
Unless Bree is still giving it to them.
Yeah, but Bree's probably... Like, I think the Hungry Choir was generating more and more power, right? Whereas, like, if Bree isn't still generating stuff through the ritual, like, does she it'd be more like the hot lead, right? It'd be like a battery. Although they promised Yalda the ritual would still
go. It's been growing for a decade. She's probably got a fair amount of battery power.
Yeah. And the fact that it was powered by the war in Afghanistan is it's a big battery.
Yep. That's true.
So actually, this discussion has made it very interesting to me, just thinking about the Carmine Beast's power and what happens with that. Like, because if it is true that, like, the Hungry Choir's power has kind of transferred to Bree in that way, and that she has to uphold those oaths, like, what would that mean for anyone that tries to take a chunk of the Carmine Beast's power? Like, are they then like automatically kind of subsumed into that role, or
I think they can make a strong case for it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good question though. Like when you kill someone and take their stuff, how much of their responsibility do you take as well?
Yeah. I did want to. I did want to do like the very classic like trans person thing, and just say like Zed as like a trans dude is really cool. Like just having like trans men are like really underrepresented in media, so it's really really awesome to like even have one. And yeah, he's really really cool. And I have been like ever since I finished Pact years ago. I don't remember when. I've been like hoping for some kind of non-cis character, like a non-binary person or a trans person in this world. And like, it's so fascinating to me, like thinking about how they interact with the spirits and all of this other thing. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. It's fantastic representation, especially because the spirits don't seem to mind. Like Zed introduces himself as Zed,
Yeah, exactly.
and as a guy, and isn't getting called Forsworn or anything. So like, that's sort of the universe and the story like agreeing that like
the
that's how
universe
it is, which
officially
is cool.
supports trans rights, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At first, that was my read, and I was really happy with it. But then I saw someone point out that Zed is short for Zed's dead name, and so I wonder if that's the only way Zed was able to get around this. So, like, at first, I was really encouraged, thinking that there's got to be a lot of symbolism in like Zed is his true name, and so that is like the universe recognizing of that. But if it's only because it is a shortening of the dead name, that sucks.
Well, I think actually,
especially for any other trans people.
Yeah, I think there's actually like some degree of like in universe stuff to show that that's kind of not how it is, because we have like Gilham talking to Lucy or any other talking to Lucy, and they immediately go Lucille. That's their default. Default is Lucille.
True.
And then they will go, at specific request, they will refer to her as Lucy. Whereas for Zed, like it's just Zed, like straight away. Everybody is just like, oh, look at Zed, except for one absolute dickhead who is a fucking
damn it, Chase, you fuck.
Yeah,
but that's Chase. That's
exactly.
That's not representative.
Yeah, so I think it's quite interesting that like for someone that has declared their existence to be Lucille, like that is the default, even when there is a shortened version of her name that she prefers to use. Like the default is just to go straight to Lucille. Whereas for Zed, like the default seems to be Zed. So I'm just thinking like maybe he did like some kind of other like ritual or something, to
redefine his identity in the eyes of the spirit.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just really cool. Like that is so cool.
I guess I like haven't made up my mind on whether this is definitive yet. I'd be interested to see another beat supporting one or the other here.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that that's sort of what's happening. Just because I don't almost want to go and check. There must be a part where Zed introduced himself as a guy or something, and whether that like that would sort of be evidence.
I think it's also really interesting that all of the characters just use he him and everything like that is like in comparison to the awakening ritual where it's kind of a bit I don't know. It's really interesting to me that such that I really do think like he's gone and done some other ritual, to redefine
sort of
himself.
A cosmic name change.
Yeah.
Equivalent.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That.
Hopefully it involves less people.
But I'm assuming there's a trade-off. You trade off less paperwork for some other price that you presumably have to pay.
God, yeah.
Actually, you know what? There must be some sort of cosmic... Well, okay, because Rad Ray Sunshine.
Right? No, that was Rad Ray's birth name. It's Radical Raymond Sunshine.
Oh, God.
Rad Ray to his friends, but
Oh, goodness.
Oh. Let's talk about more characters that are just painful to like watch. It's just I
had the opposite. I was immediately on board.
I'm so in love with Red Ray.
This guy gets it.
Finally, somebody who acts how I would act if I was a practitioner, which is, doll myself up in ridiculous, very ridiculous 80s throwbacks.
Finally, someone with a proper wizard name.
Oh, God. I hate it because technomancy sounds so cool. And then the two technomancers we get are Rad fucking Ray Sunshine and Zed, who is like the 80s greaser. Like, have some style.
Sounds so
Come
cool.
on.
I don't understand. Where's the discrepancy?
I agree with all your facts, but not your conclusion.
It sounds like we're in agreement. Yeah. I guess the common question that we've asked every guest that we've had on for our reflecting on episodes is, we've got three main protagonists here, so of course the natural thing to do is rank them against each other. So I guess the question that begs is, who's everyone's favorite of the trio?
Oh, I mean, I couldn't rank them, but I certainly have a favorite. Like, I love Verona. She is 100% my favorite and has been from chapter 1. I can't rank the other two against each other. Like, I love all three of them. They're such fantastic characters and they're so fascinating. I love how they interact with each other. I love everything about it. But Verona she's just the best. She speaks to me so much. She's just the weird little kid that doesn't really get people. And yeah, I love her.
She literally stalks the knight.
Yes.
Which is very moving.
Yeah, and she's such an edgelord. And come on, as a 13-year-old, who wouldn't have wanted to go the Verona route? Please.
Fair.
Absolutely.
I shared your opinion when I first started in Arc 1. Her interest in diving into the practice early on, while Avery and Lucy were a little more cautious, timid, or uncertain. I really, as a first-time reader, I was like, I want to dive into this world. I want to understand what's so cool about it. There's all this mystery dripping off of every little piece of world building. And so Verona just forging straight forward. I was like, yes, show me. Tell me what this place is about. So I was all behind that. Avery, I think, came into the fore for me somewhere early Arc 2. I don't remember where. I love having the LGBT rep, and she just has such an energy to her. And my family wasn't as big as hers, but I could definitely identify more with her upbringing than Verona's. That being said, everything took a left turn with the Paul chapter, where Lucy locked in as my favorite for the foreseeable future. She had been a somewhat distant third. She just hadn't really clicked with me until then. And that was, I think, the most powerful chapter I've read in Pale. And it's definitely top 10, probably higher for me and what I've read from Wild Bow.
Yeah, that one was awesome.
It's been long enough now that I can't really say exactly why, but there were a dozen beats throughout that chapter that just let me understand Lucy at such a deeper level, and I was just like, yeah, you're my favorite.
I definitely agree that chapter was transformative for how I understood Lucy.
Yeah.
That was the moment where it all sort of came together.
It was so heartbreaking.
Yeah. The sheer amount of shit that she's had to put up with and still is as awesome as she is, I guess, is what I would say. Just
exactly.
It's very endearing, right? It's hard not to love her.
Definitely. They're all so fantastic. They are absolutely beautifully wonderful, fantastic characters, and I love them all to pieces. I just love Verona more. She's just better. Objectively.
It's fair enough.
Yeah, it's definitely I've read so many other books that jump through.
Well, la-di-da. Look at Mr. Read so many books over here.
No, with other
I see, yeah.
protagonists, and there's almost always one where I'm like, oh, okay, it's a Frodo and Sam chapter. Oh, it's a one of the characters from The Expanse who I like less than the others chapter. There's always someone who I'm a little disappointed to see it's their point of view. I haven't encountered that in Pale.
Yeah, that's actually something I've really picked up on, because I've definitely had the same. I'm a huge Wheel of Time fan, and every time it jumps back into Perrin's point of view in that, I'm just like, oh yeah, it's fine, but come on, let's move it on. Whereas yeah, every time it's a new chapter and the name is up the top, I just get to be like, yes, we get another Avery chapter. Yes, another Lucy chapter. I'm always just so excited to see their points of view on whatever's happening.
There's no disappointment when you find out whose chapter it is ever, right? I'm like, oh yeah,
exactly.
Good. I've been wanting to know how they're thinking about this thing.
And I think to your point before, it's because not only am I interested in each of them individually and their own journeys, but also the ways they interact. Every time it's a Lucy chapter and then there's some one-on-one time with Verona, I'm just as excited as if it was an Avery chapter and there's one-on-one time with Lucy. All the permutations are what I'm interested in.
Yeah. I'll say the only thing I'm well, I won't say not interested in, but the only thing that's not as great for me is anytime we have an Avery scene with her family and my stress just goes up to 1 million. I'm just like, oh god, just get out of there. her home life is hell to me, I would scream and run away. I think
It's definitely a lot.
so much.
So I guess I already sort of asked this question a little bit earlier, but just reading this story as like a normal person who's just going to the chapters like twice a week or maybe falling a bit behind, but like in general keeping up with the schedule, like how is the experience working for you?
So I mean, I think I briefly mentioned it earlier, but I'm not doing a very normal thing with this one. Like I read Ward, which is Wildbow's previous story for those that probably should know. I read that pretty normally, but with Pale, I just like from the first chapter, I was like, I'm just going to live read this. So I brought it up and made some comments as I was reading, and it took me like an hour longer than normal or 2 hours longer than normal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that was fun. I enjoy live reading. I'm going to do that for every chapter. And so far, I'm going pretty well. So yeah, it does kind of force me to slow down and bring out some interesting stuff. Whereas like before, like when I've read things like more slowly and just kind of kept up normally, it's you pick up on a lot less stuff.
Do you folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you folks feel like there's a higher proportion of people that live read Wildbow stories than other things? Is that do I
For sure, but I think it's mostly just
the serial format?
I think it's mostly the example that we set for each other. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't dove into a community to share a work with other people before Wildbow. Like, I guess Harry Potter is like an 11-year-old talking about it with my friends at school. But like at that point, it was largely, oh yeah, I finished the book last weekend or whatever. It wasn't
it's not.
like painstakingly
What about that
going
moment
chapter
when
by
Harry- yeah,
chapter
exactly.
together.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I definitely agree. Like, before Wildbow works, like the media discussion that I'd get into is like, well, I finished reading this book and here's what I thought about it. Whereas
Exactly.
it's like, it's just this huge culture that only, as far as I'm aware, like only really seems to exist within like the Wildbow like books fandom, where we're just so excited to see what other people think, like on basically every sentence that they read. Like, I haven't been in a Discord server like focused around Wildbow works where there isn't like live read channels. Like they're everywhere.
Sure.
They use loads. I love it.
Yeah, I definitely think the serial format.
And maybe because that exists to a lesser extent with TV shows, right? Like I've seen some of this stuff with TV shows, but it's never as much. And I'm just I've been thinking about this recently, and I'm struggling to put my finger on what it is. I mean, maybe it is just the fact that Pale especially, but other Wildbow stories seem to have this effect of like there's so much between the lines that you can catch and have interpretations of and pull out because they are very well written. But I don't know. I'm trying to like put my finger on it. This isn't really to do with Arc 3. I'm just kind of thinking.
So with the TV show, like you could like record yourself watching it and like look at the expressions on someone's face, but you're a passive consumer with a TV show just waiting for it to finish. Like I drive people nuts. Twilight is amazing for not being annoyed at me doing this by pausing The Expanse when we watch it approximately 30 times an episode.
That's the worst.
And kind of, yep. I won't do it with people who aren't okay with it, but like we'll pause it like 30 times an episode and talk about like what's happening, kind of like a live read with each other. But like most people don't do that because it drives people insane.
See, I do that with my partner
a book,
too.
like while you're live, perfect. But like with a book, with a web serial, like you can just stop because you're reading it. It's at your own pace, and digest it with people.
I think as well, yeah, like the web serials being broken into these small chapters is absolutely like a big part of it. Like the Harry Potter comparison right beforehand, like you get the whole book at once.
Yeah,
you're probably not just gonna like go through each chapter and you can't copy text or anything.
Yeah, I mean, you say that like in terms of getting the whole book at once, but like we have channels for people to live read Wildbow's old works, and they do it.
That's true.
And like there are 2 people actively live reading, well, semi-actively. I count Sylph because I trust
3
Sylph
now.
To get back in.
We've got a new one too, Wofa or something like that. Waffo?
Oh yes, yeah. So we have 3 people actively live reading Worm, which is like 1.6 million words long. Like,
yep.
Like it's I don't know. I think it's just like specifically a Wildbow thing. Like I just looked on another Discord server that I'm on for a web serial, and it's got like latest chapter discussions, but it doesn't have like somebody coming in at chapter 1 and being like, I want to talk about this. Like, let's talk about it as I read it.
Interesting.
For sure.
There you go.
So, if you're interested in live reading a story or seeing other people's live reads, patreon.com/do4me. See you in the Discord.
Good on you, Elliot. Good work.
Always be hustling.
Yeah.
All right.
Like, not gonna lie, that $1 a month is so freaking worth the Doof Discord. It is 90% of my social life.
So obviously we've brought you two in. You're members of the Doof community. Do you have any nice words to say about the Doof Discord and how relatively good value for money it is? Or
yeah, because I think we always say this stuff, but like we're incentivized to do it. We've actually got like actual users here.
I mean, I convinced my wife to join, and she's catching up on Doof content right now as I speak. Like, part of this is also COVID has made this year absolutely insane, and the alternatives are lower. But also, even before COVID, we were extremely invested in the Doof Discord.
Yeah,
it's a lifeline for me right now.
The Discord is like really fantastic. It's my primary social place these days, which might be a little sad, but that's just how it is.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's definitely worth it. It's $1 a month.
All right. You heard it here first, or not first, but just as well, I guess. So if you're not on the Discord, go check it out.
I mean, you say it's sad, but like you're among friends, and we're socially distancing, so like everyone's online at this point.
Yeah, but there are no coronavirus cases here.
Oh,
so and it's
well, I'm in the middle of this hellhole country, so.
Anyway, now that our mandated sponsored segment is over, back to discussing Arc 3.
And that wasn't even in the script.
Yeah. So something else I wanted to bring up from the story was obviously I think one of the big new things in Pale is these new extra material segments that come out on most Thursdays, or
every Thursday
so far.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how that's working for y'all. Like, obviously we're getting a lot out of it here, but we're reading it twice and stuff still. How's it helping as you go through the story normally?
I am loving them like so much. Like the crazy thing is Wildbow's called them like bonus content, like the idea of that is like, oh, it's bonus content. Oh, you'll get it sometimes, and whatever. It's just it's every now and then when you can. But he's done it every week, and they're all fantastic. The illustrations, like,
oh my god,
they're so good. Like, and like the best thing is that just Wildbow does them all. Like, he does all of these little illustrations just because he can, because he thinks it's cool and fun, I suppose. And it's so cool. I love it.
He's turning into one of those people who's frustratingly good at everything, because he's also now already a lot better than me at drawing.
Absolutely.
He says that he admires people who have the ability to have multiple talents, and I'm just like, what are you talking about?
I absolutely agree with that. It's pretty crazy.
And just like even the variances in the styles, like we've got those like the portraits of Ronas versus like the little Avery doodle is almost its own little like genre of art that has popped up that I love. Like, there's a versatility to the artwork as well.
I think we have some of the doodles as like little emojis on the Doof Discord, so that's another reason you should join.
They're the best.
Always be hustling.
No, we finished the sponsored segment, kid.
But yeah, like they're so cute and they're so emotive and everything, and it's like not only is it just adorable and I love it, but also like they actually like help you think about what the characters look like, because I am one of those people that just I don't really get pictures in my head like when I'm reading stuff. Like, because I know some people will actually like build like scenes in their head as they read things and like, oh yeah, this is what this character looks like, this is what the scene is like. As I'm just like, haha, words on a page, wonderful. And just having these pictures is like, oh, okay, that's what this description meant. That's what that's kind of supposed to look like.
I can't decide if I like what Rona or dude more.
That's the name of two of the emojis. I think what Rona is the best.
I think I'd agree.
And like aside from the fantastic like drawings and everything, like the recaps are just incredibly useful. Like So, slight spoiler for the end of the thing, the end of this episode, where they've asked me to make a very specific and pointed, I think, prediction because they're really mean like that.
That's what we do.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what they do. So I went and I made a prediction, and like when I was gathering the evidence for it, I was like, well, I need to remember, what people were doing during the awakening ritual. So normally, if I was doing this for like Worm or Ward or Twig or Pact, I'd like go read that section of the book, which because I'm
20,000 words later.
yeah, so I do actually do that sometimes when people ask for clarification on stuff. I just go read like a chapter or two because I really like these books.
And then you can just do one
Yeah, and
more.
then just one more. But with this one, I was able to just bring out the bonus material and just be like, okay, cool. This is what this character was doing. This is what this character was doing. This is how they interacted. And just having like all of that like recap of like everything, it's so incredibly useful.
Yeah, I remember, like, I think in our notes for 1.2, there's like a huge page where I started doing that. Like, I was jotting down who entered through where and was like doing that myself. And then it was just like, and then I saw the bonus material and it was just that. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. This is so much easier.
Yeah. I also like that every now and then you'll get some fun little like foreshadowing about something coming up with the bonus material. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody else thought this, but like as soon as we had the like the Breeze Gadgets like one where it's got all the stuff that she's brought in, I was like, cool, the Kenneteers are getting this at some point. Like, absolutely, like they will be in possession of these things by the end of next chapter or the chapter after.
Yep,
Yeah.
same.
We had the Rad Ray, cracking into Rad Ray's security system, and then that pretty explicitly set up. And hey, these are all the people that we're about to meet in our next interlude.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was so cool.
I think that's a really interesting line that's being walked by these things because, as far as I'm aware, like all of the extra material so far is not required reading.
Yeah, I think Walbo's made mention of that.
And I think what's interesting is like there's all various different ways they fit in. So whether it's like little previews of gadgets that are going to come up, or recapping the story, or just introducing something and giving us a bit extra detail on it. Like the some of the recent stuff like the Sunny Day logs gave us some extra detail on Zed and Ray's relationship that you don't need for 3.c, but is helpful.
Yeah, it was. They're so cool. I don't understand why anyone would go through this and just be like, extra content? Nah, I've had enough pale for today. Like,
I mean, you say that, and then there's the people who skipped like the interludes.
I don't think those people are real. I think they're just trying to upset us.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Ruben on this, just because like thinking about that possibly being real makes me just too upset to like comprehend. So.
Conversely, the one person who read only the interludes was hilarious.
That was fascinating. I remember, this came up on the Parahumans Reddit at some point. There was somebody who had read Worm, but only the interlude.
Oh my god.
That's insanity.
It would be, so incredibly confusing. But yeah, like these bonus things are just, they're so fantastic. Like, sure, like some people might be skipping them, but if you're listening to this and you're skipping them, stop it. I'll fight you.
I find the bonus content really incredible for the shallow read that I mentioned before. When I'm just blazing through the story, so many little details get lost in the rush, and having access to Avery, Lucy, and Verona's Watsonian analysis is super useful.
Yeah, like there was that one where it wasn't just the list of gifts they received, but also their own thinking on all of it, and that was such a cool way to sort of summarize what we should be thinking about, because that stuff was scattered throughout multiple other chapters.
Yeah.
And it's like, that they're going to miss something. And so it's like, also, this is an exercise for the reader if you'd like to go back and check.
Yeah, those are really cool as well. And I especially loved some of Verona's like objective ratings on the gifts. This one's a 7 out of 10.
Oh, God.
Absolutely.
9.5 out of 10. No risks whatsoever. Turning into a cat.
I think that was turning into a cat, which was...
Oh, no, it definitely was.
That's gone well for her. She's been able to use that all the time, and there's been nothing like impeding her from going cat form.
I think the average rating she gave to the rest of the gifts was like a 3.
Yeah, it's been really fun watching each Kenneteer develop their own tastes within the world.
Yeah.
Like watching, Verona just go bananas for being a cat versus Avery like wanting to dive into these frankly insane paths. and then Lucy just being so practically oriented.
Mm.
Like I just love how Verona will get interested in the concept of something, and Lucy will just be like, I don't understand how I can use this. It's great.
I think I have to say that broke my mind a little bit when like Avery was like, "Oh yeah, paths. Yeah, no, I'd do another path," and I was like, "Sorry, what?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
You just went on baby's first path, and you were so horribly traumatized that you jumped when a loud noise happened near you, and like you almost died, and like why would you go on another one?" I think Verona was also like, "Yeah, I'd do one too." It's like, stop it, like don't.
It was insane to me that was baby's first path.
Yeah, it's
like how does anyone? I mean, I'm saying this to Avery as well. How does anyone do this and think, yes, this is a good career?
I think it's just descriptive of what drives her. Like when she first jumped into the awakening ritual, the key thing that she defined herself on was like, I want to go to interesting places and see interesting things.
Yeah,
and she'll do anything to get there. Apparently.
I also love how that's like evolved with Snowdrop now, where it's like it's less that she just wants to go somewhere and do something cool. Like she wants to find these like others that might be weak or vulnerable, and she wants to help them. And I love that. I love that so much. I love Snowdrop.
Out of curiosity, did she create Snowdrop when they used her as the boon companion? Does every opossum have an otter familiar personification? How does that work?
I think we don't know.
Yeah, I think it was said that the when Avery was in the Forest Ribbon Trail, I think it was sort of said that the whole place was powered by her to some extent.
Yeah.
Like so there was a bit of her in all the others there, and I think I assumed that also applied to Snowdrop.
Yeah.
But we don't know to what extent. And yeah. I mean, there's definitely like I have assumptions that I've made, but I could be wrong.
And Miss did explicitly call out that like not every opossum boon companion would be contrary in the way that Snowdrop is. I always
true.
So yeah, I mean she's just the best character. Come
on. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess speaking of, how do you both? Like, why don't we just talk about the sort of Kennet others and in our cast of colourful monsters in town?
So yeah, so I mean, the main takeaway from all of the others in town is that fairies should be like, if you see a fairy, run, cry, maybe. I don't know. It probably won't help you. You'll just get twisted up in one of their schemes. Fairy are terrifying. Like scary. But overall, I adore all of the others. Like they're all so interesting. They play off each other like really fascinatingly. Like with Toadswallow calling in the fairy, like I from everything that both the fairy had said and the goblins had said, I never would have expected that a goblin would choose to bring a fairy along, like to help them out. And like there's obviously these disagreements between them, but then also they work so well together. Well, they did work well together, and then Miss went by Miss. Yeah, like they're so fascinating. I love them. I love them so much. And the goblins are 10 out of 10, my favorite others. Like one of my favorite scenes in the book so far has just been Verona trying to feed them all chicken nuggets. While I think it was like Gash, like smushed one of the others' face into like the concrete and was like grinding it down into the concrete and like putting his hand down the other one's throat to like grab the chicken nugget out. It was so good.
That moment of realization where Verona is like, oh, it's actually like being fair to them is not the way to go. Like she had to play them against each other. Like they didn't want to be treated equally.
Yeah.
It was so good.
I remember when I was doing my live read, and I was just like gushing about how amazing like some other thing in that scene was, like how the goblins were like talking to each other, and someone was like, yeah, but do you remember what they're doing to each other right now? I was like, yeah, Gashwood's like smushing the other one's face into the gravel and like tearing it up into little like chunky salsa bits. And like that's the best part of this scene. Like how can you not love the goblins? They're so fantastic.
Disagree. They are my least favorite others by a country mile. So I thought I was going to get to just disagree with everything you said, because I thought you were just going to leave it at you loved the fairy, and I was just going to say the fairy are fucking terrifying. Moving on.
I also I love the fairy. They're fantastic.
The fairy is sort of this. There's the dichotomy of the fairy. Like the person, if I was to meet one in real life, like, and if I pretend that like when I'm treating the people in story as real human beings, then the fairy, it's like,
Of
okay,
course.
run the other
Oh,
way.
yeah.
Or if you've seen them, it's probably already too late.
Yeah.
Um, whereas like the reader in me is like, a fairy, hell yeah, this
Yeah,
is going to
fair.
be awful.
I'm exactly the same.
I think my favorite bit is that Guillerme chased Nicolette off by offering her gifts.
Oh, it was
like,
so
that's
beautiful. It was offering her exactly what she came here for. So, like, if it was vengeance, he'd give her vengeance. It's like, oh, Jesus, what does that mean?
I thought that was so good for establishing just like how baseline terrified we should be of the fairy. That like
Yep.
the other most experienced practitioner we knew of at the time met a fairy, and the fairy's like, "Hey, I'll give you everything you want." She was like, "Okay, I'm fucking out."
Yeah, that was beautiful. So the fairy, a fantastic Dawn. I'm glad you agree.
I will say that Cherry Pop is the exception. Like all goblins are disgusting, but she is self-deprecating to such an extreme that I can't help be delighted by her.
She's so good.
Her like pairing with Snowdrop
Yes.
has just been everything I
Yes!
could have
So
dreamed it
good.
would be.
Yeah. Like
100%.
like at first I thought like they hated each other, and they were like, well, not hated, but like Cherry Pop was just like trying to cause Snowdrop like more and more pain by like going and getting her milk when Snowdrop's like, oh, it's disgusting, I'm gonna vomit. But then like you know, in like 3.6, I think like Cherry Pop's very much like, no, you're part of the Goblin crew, like you're one of us, you know. I was like, aw.
Yeah, they seem to be legitimate friends.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
For sure. I go back to Snowdrop as the best character in Wildbow work, and to prevent myself from talking about her for 20 minutes. Charles. So I think Charles is painted badly by like his karmic debt shit pile, but I still don't know if I actually trust him in this.
But
That sounds like you're listening to Karma.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing I love about Charles is I'm so unsure whether we're actually meant to hate him or just we're, you know, like the way Wildbow has written the
Pity.
story is from the perspective of Karma is making us hate him, you know?
Yeah, like every description of him is colored by the characters thinking less of him, which we've sort of been told is karma.
Yeah.
But like, I love how it's still working on me as a reader. I'm still like, I just don't think I can
For
trust
sure.
this guy.
Yeah.
Also, like, if someone has a bad feeling about someone, it feels weird to be like, don't trust that feeling.
Yeah, because like Avery thinks the same thing about Matthew and Edith. Like every time we see Matthew and Edith from Avery's perspective, she just doesn't trust the way they interact. And I completely believe her 100%. Like I've basically stuck my claim. There's something up with those two just because of Avery's feeling about it. But then with Charles, it just feels like a little bit more complicated than that because the story has also told us that the universe is making us think that.
Yeah,
I think that Matthew and Edith are probably my prime suspects for the. Oh well, we can cover that later.
Yes, save it for the specific prediction time.
Yes. But they are codependent and willing to throw anyone else under the bus for each other's sake.
I mean, that's valid.
Alpiana makes me uncomfortable because she's so unabashedly evil, but like without an ounce of malevolence behind it. It's just like the just following orders of it, where it's like I don't know how this works, and I don't know if you can push back about that, but like it doesn't seem to cause you any grief that your existence is just to bring grief.
I think like she solidified a bit to me, and my feelings solidified on her when there was the reference late in Arc 3 about how Alpi didn't want to get involved in the politics of the town. Like she's that sort of apolitical, was just like, this is just the way it is, and it's all fine. Yeah, she's as you said, like she's just, this is just the way things are, and she's not really looking to challenge that.
And she doesn't have empathy for any of it. She's just like when pressed, she's like, I guess that maybe some good could result if you look at it with this kind of a squint. But like she's honestly, she doesn't care about it. She's just when pressed.
Yeah, and I love her. She's so good.
I don't. That's the thing is like I can't help but still find her very charming when she's in the scene, like the Scottish fur and stuff. Like she's just fun. And then the more I think on it, the more I'm like, come on, Alpi. Like,
I mean, I think
you can do better.
I'm willing to like cut her some slack, being, you know, an other. Like she clearly doesn't have like the same moral compass as anybody else.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, she doesn't have one. She doesn't have a moral core.
Well,
I think it's so interesting as well. Like, I feel like we're going to dive back into Alpi more just because she seems like such a perfect way to dive into Verona's whole plan.
yeah,
Because that was essentially what it wasn't. Alpi, she was originally like a girl, and then she sort of just got morphed into being this mare through
yeah. It was she was
a whole bunch of
yeah,
shenanigans.
she was a young girl, and then her entire family got sick, and
Mm.
she didn't get sick. And so what she did was she just like stood by their bedsides and woke them up when they were having like night terrors. And then over time, like they just started to kind of forget she existed, except for the fact that she was the thing that wakes them up when they're having nightmares. And yeah, then by the time that her family was getting better, like I think she notes that she was like up in the rafters of the house, like staring down at them, and like was basically no longer human. I was like,
Yikes.
yeah, like that's so cool. I love Alpi. She's great.
Yeah, I just wonder if we're gonna, because like this is the sort of stuff I worry about for Verona is what does she have to give up to become an other, and maybe this is because that's particularly I feel like that's the sort of thing like if Verona started to act more like that, that's where Lucy will start to challenge her and where conflict could arise between those two. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I do really think it's interesting, like looking at her through the lens of this is a future for Verona, and like I do not think that Lucy would let that particular future come to pass.
Yeah, I definitely think, I'm looking forward to that inevitable conflict that's presumably going to happen in the story where Verona finally either says to Lucy what she's planning on doing or starts taking more active steps down that path. And we already know, Lucy's on the lookout for Verona, right? So we will see. So one thing that our audience might not know is that Dawn, of the four of us on this call, you're the only person who hasn't read Pact before. And we did a discussion with another guest towards the start of the show who hadn't read Pact, but I kind of want to get your vibe on how you're finding the story without the backstory of Pact, the intended route where you don't actually have to read Pact to read Pale.
Yep, for sure. Honestly, it kind of sucked at the start because the community seemed fundamentally incapable of protecting first-time readers from spoilers.
Yep.
Like, in literally the first chapter, I was reading about these dark shadows and being like, "Oh, look at all these fucking goblins running around! They're so cool!" And like, "Oh my god, they're gonna be the best things ever!" And I'm like, literally, all I knew was like monkey shapes that were dark shadows, and okay, I guess those are goblins. And I've been on Doof for a year and change, maybe I don't know, it's been a while, but like I've heard so much about the goblins just through accidental spoilers that I'm like, okay, cool. I am now ascribing all this stuff into it. And then like the fairy courts got mentioned before the fairy basically had been practitioner specialties, being forsworn, like all that stuff that could have been teased out over time. So like within the first 4 or so chapters, I basically just left the Pale community on Doof and listened only to Pale Reflections. But now that it's been like 3 arcs, I've slowly been coming back in now that most of the basics have been covered, and it's been much better. In universe, though, it's been an amazing journey. I didn't feel like I missed out or needed anything from Pact.
Yeah, that's good to hear because it certainly felt from this side, like having read Pact, I was like, oh, this is a really cool way to introduce X, Y, Z. But also, like it's hard to separate the part of yourself that is already familiar with it when you're assuming that this is a good way to introduce it.
Oh, for sure. And like skipping ahead a bit with jumping into Pact myself, I like thinking about how Pact might be. Like I know there's a main character Blake who has just the worst time ever. So like thinking about how it's going to introduce different concepts, I'm expecting that it's going to be treated entirely differently. Like for example, I bet being forsworn is not going to be relayed so nicely and clearly at the very beginning of the story. I bet we're going to see it happen to someone as one of our first introductions to it, and it's going to be eye-opening to Blake. Likewise, the fairy, the trio get about 600 warnings about the fairy before they ever go to meet them, and like they still are just like, sure, let's go meet the fairy. So I bet Blake is going to have no fucking clue what he's walking into when he first meets the fairy.
This is so. Can I just say this is so interesting? This is really
this is fascinating. I'm loving this.
Give us more. Give us more. Yeah.
Sure. basically I'm just like, anytime Pale does something, I'm like, okay, so it probably didn't happen like that in Pact. And so what would be an interesting different way for it to have been introduced to readers? And so the stuff that was just like dropped in our lap for free, I'm like, okay, what's the worst way Blake could have found out about this? And likewise, the stuff that's played up for like a big reveal here, I'm like, either that didn't come up in Pact at all, or it was something Blake got for free because he had a family in the practice or whatever it is that like gave him a leg up on them, because like they're gonna have different strengths, they're gonna have different weaknesses, they're gonna have different struggles, because that's what's gonna keep it interesting, having another story here. Like Taylor wasn't Victoria and vice versa.
Yeah, I think I'm super fascinated to start hearing from people when Pale finishes who do dive into Pact, like you know, so to use your fairy example, like if Blake was to just meet a fairy and not know what's going on, like it'll be such a fundamentally different experience for you, because
Yep.
if you hear they're a fairy, you've already got all these ideas that Pact readers wouldn't have had at that point. And I'm super curious
For
to
sure.
start hearing from Pact readers. Oh, sorry, from Pale readers as they start to read Pact, on like how the story works for them, having Pale under their belt.
So I mean, Wild Bill works are great on rereads. So it's okay that like you're not going to be surprised by something on the second one, but you can try to, like, it's still enjoyable, and you can always watch
Right.
live reader if you want to have the vicarious experience. But because Pale was second, it was written intentionally around that dynamic, because Wild Bill has to satisfy both Pact readers and first time readers, and the first time readers knowing they may well go back to Pact later. So he doesn't want to, yeah. And so Pact was not written in that way. So my guess is it'll be a little bit less elegant, where it wasn't written up front with the intention that someone's coming in and possibly has a fraction of the world building already installed for them.
Yeah, right.
I'm excited for your live read. Let me just say, Dawn.
Yeah. I'm just sorry. I just went quiet for a bit because I'm just picturing all these scenes in Pact
Yeah, I
and how
know,
somebody
right?
who's read Pale might
Absolutely same.
like
Yeah.
respond to them.
For sure. But I am 1,000% interested to read Pact after this. I was like kind of interested beforehand, but like people would rep it on the Discord. I know Kippos and a variety of others said it was their favorite at times. Or might have been Twig.
Yeah, my favorite's Twig.
Get out of here.
But like I'd be distracted by other things. But now I'm super bought in, and Twilight wants me to wait until she's ready to go through Deep Impact with her. So we'll see. It's a lot easier to keep up with Pale than turn through an entire Deep Impact backlog.
Yeah, the Deep Impact backlog is too big. What idiots put that together.
It's good. It's worth listening to.
For sure.
Thank you.
Are there any other like expectations that you have going into Pact that you think are interesting to discuss, Dawn?
Well, so I think that we'd probably see some practitioner specialties that we may not come across in Pale. So, or if so, they'll be like different amounts of fleshed out. Like, for example, I doubt that one of the main bands of whoever Blake hangs with is going to be a finder, because that would feel a little repetitive if Avery was doing that. My guess is augurs wouldn't have been as investigated, and like I'm repeating what I said before, but like inverting what we're seeing. Conversely, stuff that's only hinted at in Pale could just be brand new world teasing, or it could be something that Pact readers have a bit of a leg up, and they get to laugh at us as we're just like, oh, what's that? And you're like, oh, if only you knew.
Do you have any thoughts on what those might be? Just for my own entertainment.
Let's come back here. Maybe I'll just think about it sometime while we're
Fair
chatting.
enough.
Okay.
I have to admit, there was definitely like a part of that when we were doing like Arc 1 of Pale, and you'd see someone who's only reading Pale and they haven't read Pact, and they'd say something like about the fairy, and of course, like all the Pact readers, like,
absolutely, yeah.
But it's such a testament to this world that, like what you're saying, like there's all these other branches of the practice or something. So like you not knowing anything about Pact, you're sort of like, well, okay, it could just be dealing with all this stuff to do with this world that just isn't even coming up in Pale. And it's so crazy to me that you know, like that's sort of an option that like Pale is not wanting for world building. But it's also set up that there's so much that you're just willing to believe that there's a whole other half to it that you're not even seeing.
I guess I wonder, like, are there the pale equivalents of lawyers? I think they covered judges in a couple different dimensions, but like people who like go over contracts with people, like is there demonology? Are there priests? Are there like ways to ward off all of these different things? Like we haven't covered too much of that in pale. Diving
Yeah.
into more religious symbology.
I think
I don't know.
there was one practitioner that was mentioned as like worshipping a god, I think, in 3.Z.
Yeah, in 3.Z, it came up.
True.
Um,
Sorry, I don't mean to say there's no like, but like that's a passing reference rather than like a common trope that's getting revamped.
Yeah.
that's fair.
Haven't really seen vampires or a lot of other pop horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Now I'm just picturing who is secretly a werewolf.
No,
I was just thinking that.
it's Melissa, obviously.
all right. Well, thanks for sharing with us your unspoiled thoughts, I suppose, Dawn. Something else that we like to do when we're reflecting on an episode is dive into the arc title here. So, Out on a Limb is obviously the title of Arc 3, which has is an idiom, means to to kind of stick your neck out for something, I guess, to go out on a position that you believe in, even though potentially there's danger there. Obviously, it comes from this idea of like climbing out on a shaky limb of a tree of a tree, right? Does anyone have any thoughts on what Out on a Limb might have been referring to in this arc?
The definitive element for me in the phrase is the risk, and this can be especially at your own expense. So like if you're putting yourself at risk for someone else, it can be self-serving, although I think of that less. But to epitomize that, right at the beginning of the arc, Miss in a way kicks it off with doing so for Avery because Avery was able to guess her nature, and so she was like, "Sure, I will go out on a limb for you in exchange."
Yeah. Like I agree. For me, like when I think of like Out on a Limb, I think of like sacrificing or trusting someone else. Like when I use the phrase like I'm going out on a limb, it's usually I'm going out on a limb for person X. Like I'm taking a risk and trusting this other person. Obviously, like you're right. Like Miss opened the arc by doing that. We had all these moments with Verona getting burnt by her dad along this line, or like Rowan not willing to put himself out there much for Avery, like lots of little sort of details like that. We have Snowdrop, who we all love and we absolutely trust would do anything she can for Avery and probably even the other two.
Yeah. Actually, literally, Avery stood on a limb at one point in this arc of a tree. So I think that's the meaning, definitively. But I think it's interesting that like Verona, Avery, and Lucy go out on a limb and trusting Bree and Zed, and very much like they're not getting that trust from the others. Like that's not a relationship that currently has that level of trust. But apparently, it's fine to do it with outsiders. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think like watching the town sort of fall apart, like what we're seeing here is not the trust inherent in each other, and people are not going out on a limb for each other in the town. The Kennetiers and the Kennet others specifically are not extending this trust and willing to do stuff for each other.
Yeah.
And then of course the word limb, going out on a limb, kind of immediately makes me think that Bree, interlude dined out on a limb, and in fact a whole body. That's potentially another meaning.
Dined out on a few limbs, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that one. I did actually, like, speaking of her, like, seeing her through the sight was fascinating to me, like, in how I'd been wondering about what happens to someone after they win, and looking at her through the sight, and she's just mangled and is missing, like, half of her limbs, and yet she looks completely fine. That's so interesting.
I think that's going to be really interesting as well, because she's talking about awakening.
Yeah,
and
oh god.
She talks about herself like she's fine physically. Like, is she going to have this moment where she awakens, turns on her sight for the first time? It's like, what the fuck?
Oh shit!
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that, and now I'm terrified.
Oh goodness!
Because the sight kind of gives off this vibe that you're seeing how the spirits see something, right? Like you're seeing more like a spirit would see something. And so if Bree is awakening, that is, she's defining her identity by how she is to the spirits. And so she's kind of like explicitly tying herself more into this like facade, I guess. You know, the fact that she's physically fine over the top of this like absolutely ruined spiritual identity underneath.
Yeah. So exactly what Avery's doing with Gilham's glamour right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Precise.
Oh, that'll
Oof.
not an addiction.
No, I'm sure they're not at all similar, and there's no connection between those two.
Have we seen any of the practitioners see themselves in a mirror with the sight?
I think the closest was Lucy noticing her pink hair.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Gotcha. Right.
She does look at herself in the mirror while her mum is doing her hair in chapter 1.4 or something like that.
Yeah, because doesn't one of them freak out that they see their animal form in the mirror when they turn on their sight? Was that Lucy when her mum was doing her hair, or was that another?
I think that might have been.
I remember a scene where somebody was like, "Whoa, there's a cat in my peripheral vision."
Well, it was probably Verona then. If I had to guess.
Well, no, the cat was a good example.
You've cracked the
always phrased example, but yeah.
Ruben's cracked the code.
Well, speaking of cracking codes and solving mysteries, the other question that we of course have to ask everybody is, who's behind it all? What are you thinking? Who's behind the mystery?
Yeah, this is something we force every Reflections guest to do, is, you know, make a bold and specific prediction. So who's going first?
Well, I suppose I'll go first here. So I think I mentioned it earlier, but I went back and looked at the awakening ritual because it was obviously brought up as them, Lucy in particular, believing that the ones that killed the Carmine Beast were the ones that interacted with the coin in the awakening ritual. And I'm kind of thinking, like, maybe that's not quite right, because the coin represents like the furs and the power of the Carmine Beast. Whereas if we're talking about murdering something, we're probably going to look at maybe like a skull for death. All right. So
I can see it.
So what I have is, not only was the coin important at the awakening ritual, so was the skull. So the skull is related to individuals who caused the death of the Carmine Beast, and the coin relates to those that seek its power or sought its power. So Matthew didn't seek its power, but he did participate in the killing. He entered via the hourglass and left by the skull. So killing her wasn't the primary motive. The primary motive for him was the hourglass. So I'm kind of interpreting the hourglass as either his mortality with respect to like Edith, who is maybe immortal because she's a spirit, or maybe the hourglass is literally supposed to represent Edith, who is, you know, the girl by candlelight, candles being another way to tell time. So Matthew participated in it, helped kill it, but didn't gain any of the power, didn't want any of the power.
That hourglass, like, Edith is explicitly something that's like ephemeral, that's fraying, and they have to work to keep her together. So like maybe the motivation there is the role that the Carmine Beast provides gives a sense of permanence and stability that would fundamentally solve Edith's issues. And so that might be Matthew's motivation there.
Yeah, perfect evidence that I'm correct. So next, so Edith entered via the skull and then left via the coin. So like her primary motivation in this was the death of the Carmine Beast. Look, I'm not sure why. Like probably there's loads of speculation around why she would want the Carmine Beast dead. And I think there's been some talk about like being able to petition the court for the ability to have a child, you know, and keep it safe. But from killing it, which was her primary motivation, she hoped to gain the power. So she does want the power, but mainly she wanted it dead. Marcy, that fairy whose name I cannot say, presents primarily female. She entered via the thread and left via the coin. So she didn't seek the death of the Carmine Beast, and she wasn't actually involved with the death at all, but she really wants the power. Like she wants those, that blood, fur, and bone of the Carmine Beast. And, you know, maybe she wants to become the Carmine Moth. And so I'm thinking like thread might tie into like her schemes, because like Gilham had thread in his a bunch as well. Or thread might also just like kind of refer to like the nature of an other. Like her nature is to scheme. And so she sought like its power because she's a schemer. So then the goblins, except for Toadswallow, because he is different and better than the others, they entered via the blade and left via the skull. So they didn't actually seek the death, and they don't actually want the power, but they enter via violence, which is the blade, and just murder her because they're goblins and they want to stab things because, they're goblins.
Fair.
They don't strike me as people who would be particularly difficult to co-opt into a potential
Into a
murder.
murder plot. Yeah.
Please help me beat something to death. And they're like, what? Where? Like,
Yeah, sure.
now? Awesome.
Name the
We'll
place.
pay you.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Hungry Choir, and they entered via the skull and left via the coin. So they did seek her death, and it's like maybe it's for the power primarily, or like I'm thinking maybe it might be vengeance for the Carmine Beast for like not helping them when they were Yalda and living in Kennet before getting fucking murked by her best friend. I'm thinking like maybe they sought help from the Carmine Beast. She refused to provide any, and so the Hungry Choir is like, well, we're just going to murder you now. And they also want that power. So yeah, that's my prediction that those are the people involved.
So my sort of like thoughts on this, like jumping specifically on Marisica, I think I joked a few episodes ago that it might turn out that she's doing all of this just to get that note from Guilherme. But I think that started as a joke, and the more I've thought about it, the more I actually think that might just be what's happening.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like my theory is like she is just, this is all just a sideshow for her. It's part of her scheme to just get this note off Guilherme. Because like that just seems so Machiavellian villain that like all of this bullshit, she's upsetting like an entire region of Canada just so she can steal this note. I also like this idea because it means Guilherme might actually be willing to sort of side with the Kenneteers if it stops Marisica. Maybe. But yeah, I mean, that's just my sort of thoughts on where Marisica might fit in. She's just kind of involved with this because it causes chaos that lets her get the note.
If the Hungry Choir was created, then maybe it owes some sort of debt or service to what created it, so that might be related to the coin.
Yeah, could be.
That's a good point. Like if these entrances and exits are sort of summarizing them as beings, like it might have more to do with just their existence rather than
their
like
specific tie to the murder.
Or their like specific intent.
Mm.
Like Yulna, I don't know how much Yulna may have been able to control that she wanted to be part of killing the Carmine Beast.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, what about you, Dawn? What have you got for us?
In comparison to that, I've been swinging by the channel a little bit more lately, so I've been consuming other people's thoughts. So I think I'm just basically parroting what other people have said, but like, and we've been talking about, but Marisica being the power behind it. Charles, even though he's forsworn, if he comes across the materials, then he can still like do practice, not via his own power, but by just carrying out the motions. And so Marisica funneling the necessary stuff to him via proxy. I don't know how Matthew or Edith could do this. Like, I see the motive for them in spades, but the means less so. Rereading Edith's and Marisica's interviews is really interesting. Like, Edith obviously was being dodgy the whole time, and that became more and more evident over the course of it to the point where it just devolves and they have to stop it. But like, rereading Marisica's is hilarious. She does not answer a single question straight. Like, sure, like most of the time she's deflecting into gifts. How about some gifts? Have we talked about gifts yet? But like, every answer she gives is a step to the side at best. And it is cool. She has a neat line there, going back to the fur specifically, how she sought the Carmine Beast fur. So yeah, like Marisica, I think seeks power from the downfall, like furthering her schemes. Charles maybe revenge, and Edith permanence.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Sure. I love the fairy is so entertaining. The fact that she just didn't
yeah.
questions.
On Marisica's interview, I remember when I was live reading that, they finished with her and they turned to Guilherme and they say, "Who do you think did it?" And he just says, "Oh, it was Marisica. I definitely think it was Marisica." And it's like, yeah, okay. So blatantly, he's saying she didn't give it a single straight answer in there that like disproves that she did it. Like, it was so good.
It's odd though. If a fairy is saying X, then that makes me trust X slightly less. He's still a fairy.
This is why I don't do the fairy mind games. It's just I get
Mhm.
Yeah,
lost.
it's too
to
much.
their level. Yeah.
That being said, I think I only have one correct prediction in Pale so far, and that's like the instant mismentioned lost. I was like, "You're lost, aren't you?" I have no idea why, but like, I remember Wildbow in the Doof asked me, he was like, "Why would you think that?" And I was like, "Just feels right."
Well, it was.
Well done.
If I have any other predictions, I think it's just that Verona will not become another by the end. It would be interesting if one of the other two did, but I don't think Avery's interest in a partner really incentivizes her to become another unless there's a suitable other partner that comes
What
by.
about
That I
Alpi?
totally see her going other for her.
Alpi's right there.
Familiar is more the like vibe that I see there.
Mhm.
I feel like for me, within just the scope of this story, which is probably not her entire life, I feel like the win for Avery would be learning that she doesn't need to have a
Oh
partner.
God, yes.
Like I don't know, maybe I'm bringing some of my own stuff
that's
into
true.
this, but like I feel like learning to be okay with yourself is always that sort of that's the first step to being in a relationship. So like Avery ending the story being okay with who she is by herself, for me would be like, okay, and now she can move forward and find a relationship.
And hopefully she can stop fantasizing about having dates with her teacher. It's really creepy.
Yes.
Mm.
Oh yeah, I mean like when you're a young teenager, like from her perspective, I don't actually think it's that creepy. Like that's just what teenagers
Yeah, but
do.
it's also really creepy.
And
Like, yes, but also it's creepy.
part of this is that I've moderated my position on Twig significantly since I started reading it, where the only thing I knew about Twig early on was that it was biopunk, like a world of bonesaws, and that Wildbow specifically tried to amp up the romantic nature of his cast because he felt that it had been a bit lacking in Worm and Pact. And so, like, you drop in to the first scene and it's a bunch of 12-year-olds, and I'm like, what the fuck? And so like I had some strong reactions to that really strong preconception I had. And so over the course of a couple arcs I worked myself off that to being like, this is like, I was 12 once, and like I was interested in other people, whether or not they were age appropriate for me. Like it's new and interesting, and you're trying to learn that out. So like I've moderated myself significantly, being like, these are 13-year-old girls, and if they're crushing on someone twice their age, okay, that's what a 13-year-old girl does. And the teacher has the appropriate response of being like, and you're going that way now. Like, oh, I can tell what's happening here, and I'm having absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Like, I don't get squicked out because she's 13. She's doing 13 things, and the teacher is appropriately responding.
Yeah.
Do we have any other final predictions or any other things that we want to say about this arc before we start to wrap up?
Just on becoming another, it feels like the failure state of all of them. So
Mm.
I hope all three of them succeed and not becoming another. But I'm interested to see however Wildbow takes it.
I don't think we've had an example so far in the story of like a human becoming an other where I'm like, yeah, this was good. Matthew's probably the closest I can think of, but like I still don't feel like we have the full story there.
I mean, I think like
But
Matthew
True.
becoming an other is just him like absorbing the doom, which is kind of the worst way to become an other, really. Like,
Yep.
yeah, well, exactly. Like he did it because he had to.
Yeah.
From the sound of it, not because he
Yes.
wanted to.
Yep.
Whereas like every other sort of human to other situations, just all the others, like none of them seem like they're happy.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Verona's had this beat that she's hit of like, if you look at every single adult, they don't seem happy, so I'm going to become another. But she hasn't really taken the next step of thinking, well, let's look at all the others and think, do they seem happy? Which I feel like if she asked that question would help her readjust her worldview a little bit.
So that's too many steps to think.
Yeah. We'll worry about that after we become another, I guess.
Exactly.
Well, she'll have all the time in the world.
I don't know if this is a prediction, but my hope for the story is becoming that the trio has some sort of redefinition of the relationship between practitioner and other, which seems like mutually parasitic right now. So I don't think they're gonna get systematic change going, but at least paving the way for a new mutualistic one. Because practitioners seem like the cops of this world, and in both ways, the others also police the practitioners. And so, with the current state of the world, it feels like there could be a story there around reform.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like so far in this story, it's been like a bit of an antagonistic relationship between practitioners and others.
And it seems like it's always been that way, right?
Yeah, and then Kenneth is trying to be something different, or not even. It's trying to be like an
A
isolated
refuge.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, is there a way to get these two groups to coexist in a healthier way?
For sure.
I hope so. I mean, yeah, I feel like that was something that started to come up a bit more in this arc. The idea of how the fuck do we make Kenneth work? Because with Miss Gone and all these practitioners at the gates, there started to be people being like, "How are we gonna do this?
Yeah, how does this work?
Yeah.
So I'm excited to. Yeah, I agree. I feel like that's something that we'll have to address.
I mean, admittedly, they got put into this situation with the death of the Carmine Beast. They didn't opt into it, so this whole time they've been striving against the collapse that they've foreseen.
Yeah. It's a very rough patch for Kenneth, but it's interesting. Actually, one thing I've been really loving about this arc is just that we are finally seeing practitioners out in the world. We're seeing different types of ways that you can interact with the practice, from Zed and Raymond Sunshine, to actually interesting people like that lady that summoned the big mouth thing that ate all of the creatures, that ate all of the hungry choir. That was cool.
It was so insane.
It was so cool. But we're actually seeing how else you can interact with it, and I just love that. I'm loving that so much.
Yeah, I loved. Was it Eloise, the girl with the centipede that could become tattoos?
Oh, so cool!
Oh God, why?
So cool.
That was so cool.
I think I posted about how much I loved that, and I think about 3 or 4 people put little pleading face emojis because it's a mood.
Oh.
Dawn, I don't understand your reaction to this story, Dawn. How can you not? You've gotten far enough in that we've seen some pretty disgusting things.
What's wrong with the fungus face centipede? It's so cool.
Oh God! Why?
Any other final thoughts about Arc 3 or Pale in general before we start to wrap up?
It's fun.
Cool. I'm with you there. So we'll wrap up here. It's worth pointing out, though, that after we do our outro, we will do a little bit of back-to-pact discussion with Kipos, where we talk about some pact spoiler-specific stuff. But before we go there, thanks for joining us, Dawn and Kip. It's been great to have you on the show.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful being here.
For sure. Shout out to Twiwife Best Wife. And we've got the Doof Plays crew over in Doof that play all these fun games together.
Yeah, great. We've heard a lot about the Doof Discord today. Just as a reminder, folks, if you too want to become a member of the Doof Discord, you can go to patreon.com/Doof and support the Doof Media Network. For $1 a month or more, you will get access to the Doof Media Discord, where we do all these things that we've discussed.
Yeah, I think something Dawn just touched on that I don't think we talk about enough, as we're sort of touching on the social side of things, the gaming stuff that we have going there, sessions of all kinds of games. It's so, it's just really fun. It's a great group of people, and we all get together and we play video games at times, and that's really fun.
You should come to the game club and vote to force Ruben and Elliot to play Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You get the right to do that if you become a patron.
You also get to vote in the fan art contest, which by the time this comes out, I promise the vote will be live.
He's made an oath, folks. Get your forswearing ready.
Prediction hat on.
Yes, you'll be able to find the fan art contest votes on the Patreon as well. Of course, you're not just getting all the great perks, you also are supporting all the content on the Doof Media Network, all the other shows, all the great stuff that you can find on doofmedia.com.
What you say should have just come out when this comes out, and that's, I think we've said it before, and we'll say it again. Best show on the network.
Yep.
Absolutely, best show.
Game club.
While you're on Patreon, why don't you go to patreon.com/Wildbow and give Wildbow some money as well, or as we like to call it, leaving through the coin. And yeah, to support Wildbow for making this great story. And I guess that means we've got to say goodbye to you, Dawn, so that we don't spoil you.
Yes.
It's been great having you on the
Yes,
show.
indeed.
And
Yeah,
Thank you for having me. It's been a
yeah,
blast.
awesome. Well,
And thank you for making the show in the first place. See ya.
bye. All right, well, now that Dawn's gone, we can start going back to Pact. So, Kipos, what should we talk about? Is there anything here that you want to jump into that contains or relates to Pact spoilers?
Yeah, so like I mentioned it like quickly above, but like practitioners that aren't cis, like non-binary practitioners or transgender practitioners, like I have had this thought of like, how cool would it be to have someone who is non-binary or who isn't cis, like practicing? And what would that look like in this world where so much is tied up into like gender, because you've got like, I'm going to butcher his name, Pedrig, who, you know, first time meeting Blake is calling him Rose and using she, her pronouns for him.
Yeah.
And it's like, how does that work when you've got like your identity is baked so solidly into these, like into these historical things?
Yeah.
And that's because like we learn so much in Pact about how like so many others think in long history terms. Like they, you know, the modern world is like as a heartbeat to them. And so these kinds of ideas about transgender people, which aren't quite, well, they're more known now than, you know, they have been in the past. It's like, how do you interact with that as a practitioner? Can you just like, you know, do a ritual in the sense of like mags and claim for yourself a new identity? Like, I'm just fascinated. I love it.
Yeah, or is it even just intrinsic? Like when someone like Zed realizes they're trans and sort of has, you know, goes through the journey of sort of fully realizing that, then do they just sort of get to state the claim where, you know, they can swear an oath, like truthfully, like, you know, I am
Zed,
a man, and then it just, and then, you know, the spirits are just sort of like, yep,
checks out.
okay,
Yeah.
like, you know, yeah, we've looked into it, and it turns out you're true, and like, you know, I have a lot of issues with the spirits for the way they do things, but like, it's pretty cool of them if that's sort of how it works.
Yeah, I mean, like I can hope that's how it works, because that, I mean, yeah, like I can't even like describe like how validating that would be to someone like Zed to just, you know,
to have an objective truth that aligns with what you're kind of coming to terms with about yourself. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. And to have that like so solidly reinforced by like the very workings of like the entire universe is like,
yeah,
holy shit. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
oh
definitely.
My God,
It's interesting because, you know, obviously Pact was a lot more about identities, I guess we could say, like with the whole fact that Blake and Rose had this weird shared or split identity between them, and then all the Mags/Maggie Holt stuff. Obviously, identity was a lot more of a plot point in Pact, it seems like, than it's going to be or is in Pale. But you're right, it's fun to see other explorations of the questions of identity in this story. It's really just leading to a much fuller universe in a really cool way, I think.
Yeah, like I really love it, because, you know, practitioners that weren't cis was something that I have like been kind of on and off thinking about like since I finished reading Pact, however many years ago, like 4 years ago or something. And I remember when Wildbow was putting out calls for people to come play Mile End, which was his little Pact dice game. Remember, I submitted a non-binary practitioner because, well, not practitioner because that wasn't the setup, but a young non-binary person, because I thought, like, you know, this is a really cool like concept. Like, this is an idea that wasn't mentioned in Pact like ever. Like, you know, moving out from you know, the gender binary, and, you know, how does that interact with the spirits, and how does that interact with others, and you know, it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I just love that it's just a thing, and like it's just this one, like I suppose it's just like 2 lines, you know, from Zed, or 1 line from Chase where Chase is being an absolute twat, and then 1 line from Zed where he notes that, like, you know, this is how I changed when I left that old personality behind, where like it's like, oh, okay, he's trans, oh, awesome. That's so cool.
Come on, Chase, you're less progressive than the
Yeah, I know.
God, what a bar to fall under. Fucking hell.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, Chase. Ugh. Oh, that's one of those things where it's like he's just written to be hated, but I hate him so much.
It's nice to have unambiguously shitty characters sometimes. You can just be like, yeah, that person's just shitty. Like, they're not.
Yeah, like Verona's dad. I have these moments where it's more pity than anger, and it's very conflicting. Whereas Chase is a bit easier. It's just like, you're a piece of shit.
Yeah, absolutely agree. But yeah, that's kind of been like the biggest thing that I've kind of like with packed knowledge going into it. That's been kind of the biggest thing that I've been like, whoa, holy shit. Yeah, that, and of course, like as Dawn said, it's hilarious to go back and read Marisica's like interview. It's like, no, that was hilarious the first time, actually. Like,
oh my god!
Actually,
can we touch on what Dawn was saying? That was great.
Oh my god, lawyers!
Yeah,
demonology.
Holy brought up
shit.
lawyers and demonology. I was like, whoa, fuck! What does she know?
Yeah, like. I'm pretty sure it's just because like the idea of the court of Sable and the others whose names I've forgotten. But yeah, like to bring lawyers up, it's like, oh yeah, no, that would be interesting if they were brought up in packs. That's fascinating. That one is. Oh my god!
I mean, I think.
Great stuff.
I think the lawyers Dawn was thinking of would not be the lawyers that are in the story. It's definitely a key word.
Just a funny coincidental word overlap, I think. I mean, actually, that's something that's worth diving into is the terminology of, I've forgotten what they're called as well, but black, white, and gold as the judges, right? Which is obviously is a legal term that carries so many connotations if we're tying in pact knowledge as well, like tying them to this like, they seem to almost more be a kind of fundamental force where the pact lawyers were explicitly a faction that had their own goals, right? I just find that really interesting that we're kind of borrowing the legal nomenclature again.
I mean, in general, Pact and Pale has existed in this space, which I've loved how it's similar but distinct to a lot of the big themes in Pact. And so the idea of exploring like these judges and the way they operate, like sits nicely beside the sorts of stuff Pact was talking about like people and our role in the world.
Yeah,
and like Pact talked a lot about like challenging established power bases, and Pale is doing the same sort of thing, but in a different way.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Having the two books side by side and contrasting how they look at like the themes of the book as they look at like power structures and interactions between like in groups and out groups. Like if you can if you think of like people of the Blue Heron Institute, they are an in group with themselves, and so while they might be bloody horrible to each other and fight and try and ruin each other's lives, they will like band together to go for the out group, which is
the Hungry Choir,
the Hungry Choir, or whatever.
Blake,
Blake,
well, I think it's been funny how different the practitioners look
from the other
as
side.
A unit in this story.
Oh my god, yeah.
As like in Pact, they were a fucking mess, and you can see bits of it in Pale, but they feel much more like a united force in Pale, whereas like Blake was sort of someone who just by existing was constantly challenging any unity anyone around Toronto had as a practitioner.
Yeah.
Something that's interesting that's jumping out to me from this conversation is, Pact was obviously, as you mentioned, Elliot, had this vibe of like, the established system is terrible and we need to break it down and we need to reform it. But it never really went far enough into providing what an alternative is. I mean, we had like Johannes's domain, but that obviously had flaws.
But I think that was one of our discussion questions, wasn't
right.
it? Is like we sort of said, what would you do to change the system? And I think Pale's tackling that a bit
it's
more.
interesting that Pale is maybe, Wildbow wrote a draft for that discussion question and was like, oh wait, I can turn this into a whole story. Because it is interesting to see Kennet as an example of what could a kind of, I don't know, a commune of others that self-governed look like. I just think that's such a fun question to be answering.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and like looking at the relationships between the main three and the others, it's like it's mainly positive, but you can see that there's still those hints of that basically of the oppression that practitioners have put on others since Solomon or Suleiman, I don't know. So like there's still that memory there for so many of them. and it's one of those things where all of the others have either been like directly like targeted and subjugated, or they know others that have been. And so how do you kind of like work back and move into a positive relationship between practitioners and others when you have this enormous history of like violence and bloodshed and subjugation, really?
Yeah, and so
interesting.
much. There's just so much, like, I guess prejudice is kind of the right word on both sides. Like, it seems like an uncrossable bridge, and maybe that's the role that the Kenneteers have to play, is they can kind of be the bridge.
I mean, that would be like a wonderful and incredibly fascinating way for the story to go. If you have the Kenneteers interacting with people from the Blue Heron, and then also interacting with others at home, and kind of showing to both of them. Showing to both of them, you don't have to always like attack and subjugate these others, and to the others, like, not every practitioner is going to try and bind you and turn you into a tool to be used. Of course, that means Alexander has to die. So we'll get him out of the way first, and then we can work on that.
Oh, I'm sure he'll be fine with any changes to the status quo.
Anything else that we want to touch on? Any other back-to-pact things that are worth discussing here?
I think in the notes, Elliot mentioned that he wants to go back and read Pact with Pale in mind, and like absolutely agree. Like, there's already so much more. Like, and it's funny. Like, it was one of the things that Dawn brought up is like the fairy courts. It's like, we never heard of those.
I think courts were mentioned in abstract, and we saw them, but like we had no idea that there were these 7.
I feel like it was a bit of an
right?
extrapolation from what we saw in Pact for people to be like, oh, I think it's probably something like this, and now we actually have some concrete information around that. It'll make some of these fairy things, or like when Sandra goes to the fairy world, we can kind of color those a little bit more, which is quite nice.
Yeah, like these kinds of things, like, absolutely will be fascinating going back to Pact and being like, okay, so now I have this extra little bit of like world building information from Pale. Now, what are these goblins acting like that? Where I know a bit more about goblins and all that. So yeah, I think that'll be really fascinating to do.
Yeah, like I was already keen to reread the story at some point when we first finished it, covering Deep Impact, but like it's going to be an even better experience with Pale under the belt as well.
Yeah. So when you do Deep Impact.
And I guess that's a good place to end. Thanks for joining us, Kipos. It's been great having you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Final thoughts, or
come to the Discord. Use the What Rona emoji. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Well, I guess that's the end of our show. Now, we've already done the outro, which means it's time for this show to awkwardly end.
Yay.